Of Getting Creative with Lytro, the show that's all about the collaborative crossroads of marketing and brands and the creatives and storytellers that they work with. I am your host, Andrew Sale, and I am really excited about today's guest. I'm chatting with Adam Blair, and Adam is an experienced 3D artist with a demonstrated history of working in the film and marketing and architectural industries. He's got a pretty extensive portfolio, but you can see his latest 3D work in the newest Marvel Studios releases of the upcoming Guardians of the Galaxy Vol.3 and today in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I am so excited to sit down for the next few moments with the ultra-talented Lytro community member, Adam Blair. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Adam to the show.
Hello,
hey.
Thank you, Andrew.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
You know, it's good. I'm down my co-host today, and so flying solo, which is fine. I've been doing this for a long time, so I know how to do that. But you know, Dave is a friend, and so when you don't get to sit down with your friend, it's always a little bit sad. But it's okay. We're gonna push through because I've got a new friend that we're gonna get to know here for the next few minutes, and so I'm so glad that you're joining us. So before we jump into like the real nitty gritty of who you are and all of these things, why don't you give us the elevator pitch? Give us the Wikipedia page of Adam Blair, who you are, where you come from, and what you're doing right now.
Sure. Well, first off, thank you for having me. This
Absolutely.
is awesome. I'm originally from San Antonio, Texas. It's where I was born and grew up. And really got into 3D when I was in high school, and never really turned back. I got introduced to 3D to I think it was like Rhino or something like that, and it just hooked me from the beginning. And so ever since then, I've been doing 3D. I actually ended up getting a internship when I was in high school for about 2 years. So my junior and senior year, I was a paid or unpaid intern.
Sure.
Where I actually ended up getting to work on things like for the History Channel. That was all being made in San Antonio, Texas.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so I got to work on engineering an empire for Egypt. And then I also got to work on a series called Jurassic Fight Club.
Okay. It's pretty gnarly sounding.
Old show, but it was a lot of fun to work on, and I learned so much from all the people there. But I ended up getting fired because there were a bunch of Incarnate Word students coming into the studio who were graduating.
Wow.
And basically, they were much better 3D artists than I was. But that really motivated me. And I still couldn't turn back once I got that 3D bug. And so I kept going. And I decided, okay, you know, if these artists are that good coming out of the school, where I want to go there. So I ended up going to Incarnate Word, and that's where I got most of my 3D education from.
Okay, so a couple things that come to mind when you're talking about that. One is Incarnate Word sounds like it would be like a religious school.
It is, yeah.
Okay. All right. And so you don't necessarily think of religious schools or theological higher education schools being a funnel or an on-roading stop for people in like Hollywood and for people in the film industry.
Absolutely, yeah. And it was a little known school, especially in the 3D community. But was becoming more and more well known because Incarnate Word was producing some great 3D artists who were going on to work for Sony and work for other visual effects studios or game studios. And two, I wanted to stay close to home, and yeah,
Okay.
The rest is history.
So the other piece that sticks out to me is that I'm already in this place of awe with you, not just because of the work that you do and it's great work, but that you see this moment where you could fall into a place where you're feeling discouraged, fall into a place where you're feeling like maybe this is a sign to not be in an industry. Getting fired from anything is always hard, but getting fired because other people are better than you, air quotes, better than you, is really a kick in the tail. And a lot of people could see that as a motivator to stop doing that thing and maybe pursue something else. But you didn't do that. Like, you took that as an opportunity to get better. What drives that mentality for you? Is that something that is part of your upbringing, or is it just a, grit and bear it? Like, what is it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a little of both. I mean, my parents I'm very fortunate to have always had really supportive parents who, always believed in, if I wanted to do this, then I was going to do it. And then also too, just being able to work through tough situations. I mean, for example, doing 2 years of an unpaid internship is not easy. And two, I was working another job, like a paying bartending job.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I always just had that drive of like, that no one was really going to stop me, and I was going to do this no matter what.
I love that. That's a great place for us to start in this conversation. I just feel like I feel good vibes about what's going to happen over these next few minutes. Speaking of good vibes, you're from San Antonio. I live currently in San Antonio. I'm from Florida originally, but I live in San Antonio now, and I've been here for the last almost 8 years. Let's talk about San Antonio for a second, because it's a unique place.
It is.
I don't know if you know this, but it is the 7th largest city in the country. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
And I guess you might not know that because it doesn't feel like it's the 7th largest city in the country, does it?
No, it's so spread out.
It's so spread out, and it feels like it's the biggest small town that anyone could be from. But there's some unique stuff about San Antonio, like the crossroads of culture. It's military city, right? There's I think 4 or 5 different military bases in San Antonio proper. And so there's people from all over the world coming in together, and cultures hitting from all over the place, which also means the art scene is really eclectic and it's really vibrant. How much did being from this city that's so steeped in history too, right? Like, you've got the Alamo, you've got these like really pivotal historic moments for U.S. history anyway, that this city is known for. How does being from a place like this help drive your inspiration, your influence? What do you take from being from a place like this?
Yeah, definitely. There were a lot of times where I would go to Blue Star. Have you ever been there?
Yeah, absolutely. I was there last week.
Yeah. So in high school, that's kind of where we went for fun. Was either Blue Star or there were a lot of art studios that would host open nights and that kind of stuff.
For those who are listening and don't know San Antonio area, can you explain just briefly what Blue Star is so they know what we're talking about?
Yeah, Blue Star is a once a month event. I believe it always happens on the first Friday of every month.
Something like that, yeah.
And it's sort of downtown, and a bunch of artists just take over tons of streets down there and will set up wherever you can.
Yeah.
And you basically show off your art, show off your jewelry, whatever.
Yeah.
And people come up, and you can haggle your price with I don't know if you can still do this, but back then you would haggle your price to buy a piece of art. I think actually this is from Blue Star right here.
Oh wow, that's awesome. Okay. Representing San Antonio. I like it.
Yeah, back in the day. But yeah, it definitely influenced me a lot. And not only that, but there's a really great music scene in San Antonio, with things like the White Rabbit. Um, and there were a couple other really cool live music venues that we would go to as high schoolers to see some underground bands or just kind of hang out. So I would definitely say a lot of that sparked my curiosity in art and getting to know people and yeah, just kind of exploring the city.
So, going to Incarnate Word, right? Is what it's called, Incarnate
Yep.
Word, and getting your degree in this 3D film. Was it specifically for film, or is it 3D in general, like 3D modeling that can be used in all sorts of different facets?
Yeah, so the official degree is BFA with the emphasis in 3D animation.
3D animation. Okay.
Yeah.
So doing that in San Antonio, being just down the road from Austin, you've got things like South by Southwest, which is one of the biggest film festivals and music festivals, and they have all these different arms and offshoots for South by Southwest. But you've got access to all of this creative work that's coming in. At what point do you make the decision, okay, this is great, this is good, but in order to take the next step, I need to go out west and head to Los Angeles?
Yeah, so that's a little longer kind of trek. I originally, when I graduated, I graduated and went to Los Alamos National Lab
Okay.
in New Mexico, where I worked for probably about 3 to 5 months, where I was working for the government, where we created like simulations to train IAEA and nuclear regulatory agents.
All right.
So basically, we would build a training simulation, and they could train in it before they had to go and inspect
Yeah.
a nuclear facility.
Yeah, so they get a feel. It's not their first time when they're actually on site in a nuclear lab.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Helpful. It's a helpful tool.
Exactly. And then once I felt like I got the gist of it, I really started wanting to branch out. And so I started going into 3D mapping projection events.
Okay.
And so that was basically, we would go to a location and scan the building and use a bunch of projectors that were like the size of cars, and project on a multi-story building, and we would produce an animation show.
Okay. All right.
And so we would often sync it up with fireworks and music. Our biggest show was in Sugar Land, Texas,
All right.
for New Year's. And I worked there a couple years, did some really cool stuff. I did a TEDx. I didn't do the speaking part, but someone else did, of facial mapping, where we projected on somebody's face.
Yeah.
Which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Can you make my face just be better? Can I just hire you to just be a constant source of making me look better? Because I would pay whatever the cost is. I'd pay it.
Yeah, we can talk about that after.
Okay, great. Yeah, off air we'll talk about the cost and everything. Great, that sounds good.
Yeah. And then I pivoted again. I went to an architecture company, where we were doing architectural renderings for architects and basically showing off apartment units before they were ever available.
Okay. So you're on the marketing side of the architectural industry.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and while I was there, I was still really interested in game technology, and I was seeing game technology move more away from game and into other fields. And once I saw that, I really started kind of trying to push the company to use more Unreal.
Oh yeah, okay.
And then I I got to experience like an award that I won through them for architectural visualization, and there was a competition one time where it was like in 3 days we had to produce this sculpture for this competition.
Okay. Digital
And
sculpture.
and
Okay.
the only thing I had was it had to be organic and geometric, which
Interesting.
is
Okay.
real weird. But it
So
was
geodes, like, is that the only thing that's both organic and geometric? I can't think of much other.
basically.
Okay.
But no, I took this graffiti art that I really liked and made just like a amorphous kind of blob at 1st,
Mm-hmm.
and just started exploring with it. And then I started cutting through it with geometric shapes. So basically, it was for an oil company,
Okay.
and
Texas still.
yeah,
That makes
yeah,
sense. Oh, it's an oil company. All right.
yeah. And it was going to be in their like lobby. And so it had to be huge. It was like 12 feet by like 16 feet. So it was pretty big.
Yeah.
And we ended up winning it. I produced this sculpture with like all these cutouts, geometric cutouts that went to the other side. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you had light shining in a certain direction, it would cast shadows onto the ground.
Oh, cool. All right. So using the negative space to actually project the geometric shapes that were part of
Yeah.
the prompt.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And I produced it in 3 days, ended up winning it, and it's being produced. So that was my first kind of like introduction of like, if you want something, just go for it. Because my superiors were saying like, I don't know if we should really do this. And
Well,
I
because it's
was,
time, it's resources, right? Like you're
yeah,
allocating time and resources and energy into something that's untested, right? Like you don't know if there's going to be a payoff to it. There's a risk involved.
exactly.
In that. I get that.
Yeah. But yeah, we ended up winning it, and it was really good publication for us, and yeah, after spending a couple of years there, my wife and I actually decided we wanted a little adventure. So we were living in Houston at the time,
Okay.
and then we decided to just go on an adventure, and we just picked Boston.
Oh, okay. So you went right before you went left. Okay, I see.
Did.
All right.
Yeah. And so we moved up to Boston, lived there for about 2 years, and that's kind of where my film background started.
Okay.
I was trying to get into another architecture company there. They didn't want to hire me, and I tried so long. I contracted for them and everything for a long time.
You did your due diligence to get your own foot in the door.
I did,
Yeah.
yes. And so I started branching out and thinking like, oh, I've always wanted to do visual effects. And so I started contacting anybody and everybody I could in the industry, private messaging, lead 3D artists at companies in Boston, and ended up getting hired at Zero VFX,
Okay.
which is still in Boston doing great. They do a lot of Mark Wahlberg projects.
Okay.
Um,
That tracks.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of where I got started in film. I started doing tracking and match moving and all that kind of stuff, which I had no idea anything about. So shout out to Sergio, who was amazing lead for that to teach me and show me the ropes. But then gradually I wanted to get back into the 3D field. And so after a lot of asking and showing my work to the higher ups, I finally was able to get more 3D work from them. So that's where I got to do 3D for like Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, some stuff for Little Women, 2019. And yeah, really started getting into it.
So before we get to the Hollywood of it, I want to backtrack just a little bit because you said something that stood out to me. You were pushing on the architecture side. You were pushing for them to engage in the Unreal Engine. And for people who are unfamiliar, Unreal Engine was originally developed as a gaming platform for you to roam around as third person character, fighting games, whatever it is, exploring games. What was your drive for them to push to that? Did it have anything to do with the idea of helping people connect to seeing themselves in a space, and the idea that from a marketing perspective, if a person can see themselves in a physical environment, then that helps them convert into, hey, I'm gonna buy this. Was that part of your pitch to them?
No, but that's a really good idea.
Cool. All right. You can use that next time.
I think I might. Yeah. No, a lot of it was just because our renders would take a really long time, and to minimize on that, to put it in real time, where you didn't need to render, was a huge advantage.
Okay. So you were looking more from the perspective of workflow, not necessarily the end customer, but ultimately it could end up helping both, be a win-win, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And then not only that, but once we started exploring it, moving past the just rendering, there were things that you could easily do, like switch textures in real time. You could actually walk around the physical space. I mean, these were things that were novel in any 3D software, especially used for architecture. And I just really saw the potential for what that could be, and a lot of other people did as well. To give them credit, there were a lot of people working and pushing towards that same goal.
Awesome. Okay, so okay, we'll fast forward back again to where you've now started doing a little bit of work in the film industry, but you're still East Coast. And I am picking up on the fact that you've lived in a couple of places that are very historic. Maybe you just really like living in historic places. Maybe it fills your soul. I don't know. I don't want to imbue you with any sort of reasoning behind it, but I'm picking up on these trends for you. But now you're working in the film industry. What drives you now? What takes you all the way to the other coast to say, hey, Los Angeles is where I'm going to set up shop with my family?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it was the pandemic. That was really difficult for everybody.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting laid off from Zero VFX, and right when I was getting to do some really cool 3D work. So I was definitely heartbroken. And once that happened, I started to branch out again. So I couldn't really find any work in visual effects, and nobody was hiring at the time. And so I started going to museums, and I would pitch them this idea of being able to scan a sculpture and give them the 3D file so that they could use it on their website to possibly drive traffic.
Yeah.
You could basically see the sculpture without having to be there.
Like a virtual exhibit.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we paired up with another developer who actually put it on your phone to where you could place the sculpture inside your room and walk around it.
The AR features built into the phone to make it, again,
Yep.
it's like, before, if you can put a person in a physical space with something where they can visualize themselves there, you're gonna have a higher conversion rate for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so I ended up doing 5 sculptures for the MFA in Boston, which was really cool. During the pandemic, it was all closed, and so I got to basically get a private tour of the MFA. And spend like 3 days there just photographing statues. which was amazing.
That sounds like a dream. It's like Night in the Museum, but without the tiny soldiers coming after you. I love it.
Yeah. But yeah, that just came about because I was curious and had an idea and just started contacting people out of the blue. And yeah, ended up getting that job for a while. Ended up completing that job and uh, moving on back to Zero VFX. It was a lot of contract work, so it was like off and on.
Okay.
Um, and
Which I think a lot of people shifted to during the pandemic, right? Like there was a major shift to this once the pandemic started that I don't want to say recover. I think that set a new direction for how people work. I mean, it forced us into this place where we had to be creative with how we got creative, right? With how we actually were able to produce work. And so that sounds like you were right in line with the majority of the rest of the country.
Yeah. And then I did this weird project for the MLB where we basically created a virtual crowd since people couldn't go to games.
Yeah.
The MLB executives wanted to experiment with a virtual crowd who could react to things happening on the field, who could cheer at good times and boo in bad times. And we had a completely customizable audience to where you could put them in any stadium and in any jerseys.
Like you
or
could swap
anything.
out their garb. That's awesome. That's really
complete
cool.
with signs and animations and everything. And so we did MLB broadcast for just one game.
That's a lot of work for one game.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us working on it knew that it was just like it was a Band-Aid. But we definitely thought it could have potential for some other things. But yeah, once that job was done, my wife and I decided like, okay, we're a little tired of Boston, tired of shoveling snow. Much credit to my wife. She did so much of that. And so, yeah, we decided to move out to LA. We knew that I would be able to get a job pretty easily, hopefully. And she was able to be the director. She's a therapist, and so she was able to be the director of a new branch out here in LA.
I'd like to think that you said, "Hey, let's move out to LA. I'll take care of the snow shoveling once we get there."
Yeah, yeah.
That was part of your sales pitch to getting out there. So even though the MLB thing was only utilized for one broadcast, was that a big selling point for you in your portfolio of things? Say, here's something that I helped develop. Here's something that I was a part of. Did it ultimately become a really nice stepping stone for you and something nice up on the shelf for people to be able to see when you were trying to get work?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt it really showed my versatility, and showed how I can be creative in a field that I maybe don't know everything about.
Yeah. So yes, you're versatile and we're seeing that, but if you had to nail down one thing that is your ultimate strength that you bring into this field, you're having a job interview with me and I'm saying, what's the one thing that if I don't hire you, I'm not going to have this on my team? What is that you bring?
I mean, I definitely possess a lot of attention to detail.
Okay.
And not only that, but within that, I'm able to troubleshoot things before we ever get there. So I know, like, if I can hear a project from beginning to end, I know exactly where the pitfalls are going to be, and how to get over that. And then too, in VFX, there's a lot of really stressful situations that you get into, and I found that I was really good under stress. Just calm, collected. Okay, I know how to do this. Or I know a different way to do this other than something that is going to take days. I could probably do this in a couple hours.
Is that because you have an understanding of how it works, or just you're generally just a calm person and have a we'll figure it out? Or do you have enough knowledge that you can be confident? Because those are two different things.
Right. Yeah. I'd say it's probably a little of both.
Okay.
My cat's in here now.
Okay. So then let's take this now. We're in LA. We're trying to get work. You are now pitching yourself. This is now what, 2 years ago?
Yep.
Okay. If I'm tracking the math right. So this is 2 years ago. And I'm looking at your portfolio. I'm looking at some of the things that you've worked on, some of the jobs you've worked on, and it seems like you got to LA and started working right away because you've put out some films over these last couple of years that you were a part of. So talk to us about getting into. I know there's a lot of projects, but let's talk about the Marvel Studios projects because you've done a handful of them at this point, and you've done them in a very short amount of time. So what was your foray into the Marvel Studios projects?
Yeah, so when I got to LA, I was knew somebody at the third floor, which is a previous company.
Okay.
So basically, they take projects in the very beginning stages of the development. And we'll take the concept art and the storyboards from the directors and make the film in full with whatever we have. And so as I was working with the third floor, they had done some Marvel projects in the past, but weren't really sure if they were going to get any more. And so I actually got moved into, instead of previs, I got moved into the postvis section, okay. Which was a new development for the third floor. And so basically I was responsible for finishing previs shots. I would polish animations for characters, remove blue screen, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. You're using actual footage now, whereas previs would be more like cinematic stuff.
Correct.
Not cinematic. Yeah, cinematic, right?
Yeah.
Where you're using you're animating the storyboards, but it's
Correct.
just illustrations. Now you're using the actual footage, combining it with the shots, like the CG shots.
Well, and even in previs, we still had models of the characters, 3D models of the characters.
Oh, okay.
And,
all right.
And the beginnings of the sets.
Okay.
And so we would actually animate the cameras in 3D, block out the characters, do some basic lighting, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the more I worked for the third floor, I think the more they realized that I was kind of this like go-to person who would just, I never requested shots, which was apparently a big no-no.
Okay.
Where like artists would be like, well, I want a better shot, or I want a cooler sequence. Yeah. I never did that. If you gave it to me, you could expect that it would be done.
So you became a tool in the toolbox. Like you are hey, we know that if we're going to give it to him, he's going to knock this out, and he's not going to complain, and he's not going to whine about wanting the hero shot.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
Exactly. And I really think that did help because once we really started getting into the weeds, they started giving me shots that other artists couldn't quite complete, or they didn't know what to do.
Okay.
And I was kind of that go-to guy, which I really loved, and I think just kind of pushed me a little over some of my coworkers.
And so the first project that you worked on that was released was Doctor Strange, am I correct?
Doctor Strange, yeah.
Okay, so Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Yep.
Were you a comic book kid growing up? Did you read comic books? Were you a superhero guy? Like, was this a dream project for you, or was this just another project? Like, how does that hit Adam?
So I wasn't a comic book fan.
Okay.
But I was always very interested in animation from an early age. I mean, the Animatrix was a big, formidable thing when it came out for me.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I never I always loved superhero movies and just the stories in general from that. Like I said, I never really got into comic books, but I still always loved the fiction of it all.
Okay.
Um, and so yeah, it's once I heard that I was on Doctor Strange, I was ecstatic. I mean, Doctor Strange was I think one of my favorite Marvel movies.
Okay, the original one.
Yeah,
Okay.
and to think that I get to work on the second one is just it was amazing. So
So then take me now to this place where you're actively working within a Marvel franchise. Do you get to go to the premiere for that as part of the team? Do you go and sit on opening day and point out your name? Like how does that feel when you're going to a movie theater to watch this massive thing happen? What's going through your head?
yeah, so I wish I would get invited to those things. Never did. But that's okay because I mean there's so many people who work on those films
Sure.
and but I would get invited to screeners and that
Okay.
kind of stuff because when I moved out here, I had a couple friends who I worked with at Zero who now also lived in LA.
Okay.
And they were VES members.
All right. Yeah.
And so I got to go to screeners with them and that kind of stuff. So Doctor Strange, though, I had bought a ticket with everybody else and sat in the theater until my name came up, and I was like, "That's me."
That's got to be exciting though, right? Like there's like I think we've all had, or the hope is that we would all have these moments where we see the project that we worked on have some sort of recognition, like a public recognition of the work that we've done, and see that we've been a part of something that is universally seen as a major deal, right? Like
Yeah.
whether you like Marvel films or not, you can't deny that they are a movement. You can't deny that they have revolutionized the film industry. Like there are whole genres now kind of centered as offshoots from what the Marvel what the MCU has done. And so you are part of that. Like you've been canonized into that. So take us now to today. Today is on when we're recording this, when we're streaming this, is the opening day of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And it's a big deal for the MCU because we're kind of like stepping into the next phase of the MCU. Tell us about your work on that project.
Sure. This film was so much fun to work on. When I got introduced to it, it's funny because in visual effects, sometimes you're not sure where you're going to be put on what project.
Sure.
And so, lucky enough, I got requested to be put on this project. And so, initially coming onto it, you start looking at all the concept art that's been done for characters, for sets, for all the storyboards. And from what I was seeing, I was amazed. There were some stuff that I just had never quite seen before. And that is so awesome, so motivating to be able to see that beginning stage and to know that you were going to be part of it in some way.
Yeah.
And so for me, I basically started on it after a lot of the previs is done. And so I would come in. I don't want to say too much about the scenes that I worked on.
That's okay.
I'm afraid I'll give something away.
Yeah. We'll reconnect next week and you can tell me about all this stuff without spoilers.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. But yeah, I got to do a lot of creature animation, which was fun because you have to look up like reference videos of something that might relate.
These are otherworldly creatures and animals, but you've got to still give the illusion that they're real. So they've got to be based on something realistic, right? So was that fun? Are you a research guy? Do you enjoy that aspect of it?
I love it. Yes. It's so much fun. And sometimes you have to remind yourself, like, okay, stop looking at research. You have work to do. So that was a lot of it too. But yeah, and then along with character animation, I did a lot of blue screen removal, a lot of 3D tracking of the cameras, which is always really important, especially with theatrical releases. If you're putting anything in of 3D on top of a real world footage, you have to track that camera in 3D. And
sure, that makes sense. Yeah.
And it has to be exact. I mean, when I say exact, like sometimes you're tracking a point sub-pixel.
A sub-pixel point.
Yes.
I thought I was picky, and I get very pixel snobby, where I'm like, that needs to be 2 pixels to the left. And people that I've worked with before are like, are you kidding? I'm like, no, trust me. Like it's off by 2 pixels. And to think of something sub-pixel size, how do you even measure that?
You can't. It's
that's fun.
You can't. No. It's literally just it's an eyeball thing. And there were times where you could put it through an auto tracker and it would do what you needed and it was fine. But with a more complex camera movement, a computer doesn't understand that you're turning 180 degrees with a camera shake and with motion blur. It's going to throw the whole track off.
Sure. Yeah.
And so often you had to sit there and just track a point, and I got really, really fast at it.
At just like zeroing in on this thing and being able to follow it,
Yep.
regardless of what was happening. You said something about you were lucky to be able to work on this project, but I don't know. Maybe give yourself a little bit more credit for that, because is it luck, or are you in the right place at the right time, and the work you've done up to this point has proven that you are a go-to person, that you are a dependable person who can take the work that's necessary and get it done. I don't know if that's luck. You know, I know that there's something to be said for the work that you've done up to this point, putting you in a position to be, when they're trying to decide between you and someone else to work on this project, they're going to go with you because they know you have what it takes to knock this out. So maybe, just for what it's worth, maybe take a little bit more credit than just, my name was drawn out of a hat. There may be something more to it there.
I appreciate it.
So let me ask this question then. What types of media do you consume outside of the work that you do and the research that you do? What do you like to do when you're home? Do you like to listen to podcasts? Do you like to read novels? Do you like to watch movies? Like what is it that you like to do consuming media?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much all the above. I definitely, as an artist, I try to stay as versed as I can. But then also too, just for fun, I love watching like quirky shows.
Okay.
So like, if I could give an example, have you ever heard of Peep Show?
Peep Show. I've heard of the genre of peep shows, but never the IP Peep Show.
Yeah, and I think it's on Hulu.
Okay.
And it's a I think they're in London, I want to say. But basically it's an entire show from the perspective of each of the characters. So there are no like establishing shots. There are no like out of body shots. It's all from the perspective of the character.
Like POV, looking at other characters. Okay, all right. So like that movie something
Hardcore
Henry.
Henry.
Yeah, Hardcore Henry from a few years back. So it's like that. All right.
Yep, which was made at Zero VFX.
Hey, look at that. Full circle, everybody.
Started as a YouTube video.
So you like Peep Show because it's a little bit weird. It's not your
Quirky.
typical multicam sitcom. It's got something different to it.
Yes.
And so what stories resonate most with you? Like what gets you up in the morning? Like, oh, I hear this is coming out. I have to see this thing because it is this kind of story.
I definitely really love underdog stories. Just that feel good of that final moment when they break through and they accomplish what it is they've been trying to do for the entire film.
Okay.
And you get to like celebrate with them. You're like, yes.
We won't answer. You don't have to confirm or deny whether or not that happens in this upcoming film. I imagine that between the two of us, we've looked at our fair share of photos of Paul Rudd, mostly because I'm a huge fan, but you got paid to do it. But if you had to, so like let's say the entire film industry is burning down. It's all in one building. Everything is housed in one building, and the building's burning down, and you have only enough time to run in there and save one piece of film, one movie that is going to be passed on to generations to preserve film. What would that movie be?
Oh my gosh. That's such a great question.
That's why I get paid the big bucks. That's why I get paid podcasting dollars.
Right? Man, I'm not really sure. I mean, there's so many good films out there. I mean, some of my favorite films are definitely like The Matrix.
Okay.
Is probably one. Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels.
Sure. Yeah, that's
Really,
a good one.
Guy Ritchie. Oh, Snatch.
I love Snatch. That's a great film.
Yeah, I think Snatch is probably one of my favorite.
Okay. So potentially on a very short list, you're running through this building and you're potentially grabbing Snatch as the film to propel us into the next generation of films. Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
No judgment. I'm here for it. I love that film. I support it 100%. One final question, and then I want you to tell us how people can find you and follow you. But what sorts of unique challenges come with the particular work that you're doing? That you would say like this feels like it is unique to this industry, to this field, to this time, whatever it is. What is it that's the biggest hurdle and the biggest challenge for you to overcome?
Yeah. I really appreciate job security. And I'm sure like most people, but doing contract work was pretty difficult for me. It was always really difficult to make sure that I had enough work lined up to cover some of the downtime that you would experience.
Yeah, sure. Because it ebbs and flows.
Absolutely, yeah. And it wasn't always because you did a bad job or that. Yeah, I think that was always kind of the more difficult part of doing visual effects in film was the constant trying to bid on projects.
Sure.
And that's the main part that I didn't like. Everything else, I really loved.
Is it easy for you to get in behind a project, even if it's not something that you intrinsically love?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
like you can switch off that level and say, okay, I got to get this job done, regardless of whether or not I'm passionate about whatever it is. Something fun and cool, like Paul Rudd shrinking down to quantum size. Like that's a fun, exciting idea. The Guardians of the Galaxy film that you also worked on that's coming out in a couple months. There's a lot that really obviously is exciting about that, but then there's other projects that maybe could just feel like projects, and you can lock in on this is work, and I'm here to do the best I can do regardless of what it is.
Yeah, of course. And I think the general consensus for me is that as long as I'm doing 3D, I'm happy. Um, and not only that, but I think there were a couple of movies that I worked on that weren't big names, like The Sleepover for Netflix, which is pretty much like a kid movie.
Mm-hmm.
But within that, you get to still experiment with things, and you're trying to create something that looks photoreal. And so you get to do like deep dives into these little snippets of the picture, um, that I always found really motivating.
Yeah.
So regardless of what the project was, I was always able to find that motivation to push myself and to make it the best that I could, no matter what it was.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that tracks with everything else that you've said up to this point with your personality, your work ethic, and it obviously shows through in the work that you're doing. Okay, I have one final question before because this I do want to know this.
Yeah.
You've worked on a number of shots now. Is there a piece of work that is your most favorite? Like the piece of work that you've put out, maybe it's a particular shot from a film, or maybe it's just a film project in general. Is there a favorite piece of work that you've put out that you think is the epitome of what you are about as a creative?
Um, I would say it was probably during Ma Rainey.
Okay.
Um,
So early on.
yeah, early on.
Yeah.
Because that's where I really got to kind of flex some of my 3D skills, and doing, because I love doing environments. Um, and so I got to work on quite a bit of environment during Ma Rainey. Um, and not only that, but it was shot on film,
Okay.
which is really difficult to work with. But when directors know how to shoot correctly on film, it really helps the job down the line.
So you like that you overcame was essentially a harder project, and you are happy with the thing that came out on the other side of it, even though it was a harder piece to put out because of some of the limitations of it being shot on film. That
Yeah.
ultimately lent itself to being your favorite piece. I love that. That makes total sense. I can support that wholly. How can people find you? How can people follow you? How can people support what you're doing? Because I'm imagining every person who's watching this now, or every person who watches this in the future, is going to be like me. We're going to go see Ant-Man and Wasp tonight or tomorrow or over the weekend, and we're going to be like, hey, I know him. So how can people follow you, and how can people support what you're doing?
Sure, yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. So just look me up on LinkedIn, Adam Blair. Um, and you can also go on Instagram at ADMTBlair,
Okay.
or just friend me on Facebook. I wish I had like a better art station. I need to do that.
Okay. While you work on that, we will work on following you and supporting you and cheering you on from our audience seats. Thank you so much for joining me. This was a blast. I thank you for giving me your time. I know it's a big weekend for you, and congratulations on this release and another feather in the cap. We're excited to see that. But if you want to be part of this connected creative community that we have here at Lytro, of which Adam is a part of, if you want to chat with Adam day in and day out in our community, go over to lytro.com/for-creatives to submit your portfolio so that you can be a part of this community of incredibly talented people like Adam out there doing work in the industry day in and day out. And maybe you're sitting here and you're watching this and you are a marketer and you want your stories told and you want Adam on your project. You can do that. Head over to lytro.com and let us help you tell your next story. Let us help you share the next thing, whether it's a product that you're putting out or an initiative that you're doing. Let us help you with that. We can put people like Adam to work, because that's that's great. We want to get creatives paid. We want to get creatives out there, and we want you to have the best work possible. But for now, we're going to get out of this episode, and we'll see you next week. But until then, let's get creative.